right, we are live. And right now, we meaning you and me. So, just so you guys know, MLS Cup Final finished just a hour and a half ago, something like that. And Ed is in transit trying to get home to join in on the show. He's traveling from Fort Lauderdale area all the way back down to the Doral area. So he may join in a little bit late, but this is, I'm your host, Peter Brown, and this is the MLS Cup Final review. So hopefully some of you guys will jump in the chat and make this show a little, easier to get through when it's just you and me. I need you guys, so join in on the chat and enjoy the show. But if not, it's just you and me, and that's fine too. So, MLS Cup Final was Seattle versus Toronto. And as you guys know, I'm sure a lot of you that are watching this, just bear in mind, I am trying to host the show, run the board, and also, maybe look at some chats if anybody is joining in at this late time. It's I don't expect a huge turnout after watching the MLS Cup. I'm sure a lot of you guys, if you're ready for Inter Miami, you're ready. You had to be watching the MLS Cup Final, just thinking about where we might be next year. Hopefully, right? So, MLS Cup Final, Toronto versus Seattle. Third time that this team matched up against each other in 4 years. That's pretty darn impressive. I mean, you got to start talking dynasties, right? Do you need to start talking dynasties on these two teams? 4 out of 4 years, 3 times these two teams have matched up in the final. The last 2 times were in Toronto. Toronto winning the game in 2016. It was a 0-0 game, went to shootouts. Toronto wins. The next year, 2017, the Seattle Sounders came out victorious in that one 2-0. And here they are again, Seattle beating up on Toronto 3-1. Toronto, in my opinion, had the better first half. They in a lot of ways owned Seattle, but they couldn't score. You've got Altidore sitting on the bench. He's had a lot of injuries, so therefore, they didn't have that firepower in the to put the ball in the back of the net. However, they did control the game. They did look pretty good in the first half. Just couldn't finish. And look, hats off to Schmetzer. I forget his first name, but the Seattle head coach. This is a guy that has been with the club since their USL days. I remember, in the USL days with Miami FC playing against the Seattle Sounders, he was the head coach. Schmetzer, then when they went to MLS, he had to take the back seat. He had to humble himself and take the assistant coaching job as they hired Siggy Schmid to lead this team. Once they eventually fired Siggy Schmid, and rest in peace, Siggy Schmid has passed away. But before that happened, they had let him go, obviously. And Schmelzer, kind of under the radar kind of guy. I don't think he's gotten the kind of respect that, he probably deserves. Being a career Seattle head coach is pretty impressive. And so here we go. We got some people in the chat now. Welcome, Ernie Fernandez. My dream matchup in 2020 Cup Final will be Inter Miami versus LAFC. Nice. And then Nicholas Gautier, if I'm saying your name right, and keep in mind, everybody, I butcher everybody's name. He's in there as well and says it was the other way around. Seattle won the first meeting, Toronto the second. Is that true? You might be right, Nicholas. I may have gotten it mixed up. I wrote a few notes before this, and you are correct. You are correct. I'm trying to do this without looking at my notes, trying to look at the camera, and I messed up. But thank you for correcting me, Nicholas. That's what I need you guys here for, because I will say all kinds of stupid stuff, and I need you guys to correct me. Gabriel's in the chat as well. When will we get our first players? This week? I heard we may get up to 5 players. We'll get to that in a few minutes. Let's just continue talking a little bit about the MLS Cup Final. I'm curious. If it wasn't for that own goal, Leardom, he scores off of a defender, I think he is, takes a shot and it goes off a Toronto defender. If it wasn't for that deflection, the game could have been different, right? Because the game totally changed once that own goal happened, and then all of a sudden it was thanks, Nicholas. You got my back. I need you in here. If it wasn't for that deflection, I wonder if the game might have been a little bit different, because Toronto did, in my opinion, like I said, have control of the game. But I think they really hurt the fact that they didn't have. Sorry about that. I think they really did. They did really hurt the fact that they didn't have Altidore in the game the entire game. I mean, he came in late in the game, scored that last token goal. So good for him. And he recently signed a big contract, so he definitely needs to perform. He needs to get those big goals. Question also was out there for some other Toronto players. If they're going to come back and make big contracts and big contributions. Curious to see what Toronto's makeup will be in next year. So good question there. Good thoughts there. Weird goal on the own goal set. Yep. So as I'm looking up, Toronto's, you got to wonder also. There's been some talk about Toronto and their with their head coaches, if he'll stay with the team, if he's really happy coaching the first division team, if he'd really be more happy coaching like the academy and stuff like that. That's something that they were kind of bantering about on MLS, their podcast show that I like to watch. But in Toronto's news, gosh, I can't remember people's names off the top of my head. I need Ed. Where are you, Ed? Ed? In case you're just joining, Ed is trying to join the show. He's traveling from Fort Lauderdale back to Miami. I had a feeling he would not make it on time. And, well, as I'm checking Skype, he has not called in yet. He still has not made it on time. But exactly, one goal. Home field advantage. Something like 69,000 people at Seattle's game. At what is it, Century League Field, something like that. I think I read somewhere that it sold out in like 2 days. So here's the question I have for you: is all of you guys are Inter Miami fans? The name also forget. Hang on a second. I'm all over the place. Bear with me. Michael Bradley has been in the news lately because as a Toronto player, the thought kind of was if he doesn't win, he won't get a big contract. So it's time for him to I think his contract's coming up soon, and they didn't win. So do they bring Bradley back? That's a good question. But anyways, I was at Fox and Hound. For those of you that have been in South Florida for a long time, might know Fox and Hound. Fox and Hound is a classic English pub that is close to Lockhart Stadium. It might be the closest soccer kind of bar to Lockhart. It's just minutes away. So we were there with a big group of Inter Miami supporters. We actually had a couple from Seattle that were there as well that joined the watch party. But as we're sitting there, you can't help but wonder what next year will look like. Can you expect a first-year team like Inter Miami to make it to the MLS Cup Finals? It's unrealistic, but they keep talking about bringing in big-name players. And if they do what they say they want to do, and these big-name players, it's possible. But then again, you look at what happened at LAFC, and they had such an amazing season, and they fell in the playoffs. So If MLS Cup Final is hosted in Miami, would it be played in the Hard Rock? Ernie Fernandez asks. That's a good question. Because it all depends on who has the best records, right? So the best record gets awarded the game. So let's assume Miami has the best record, and they're playing in their first year, and they're playing in an 18,000 seat stadium. Would they play the game in the 18,000 seat stadium, or would they move it to Hard Rock? I don't know. I mean, I guess that really depends on the demand. If every game next season is sold out, and there's a waiting list for people to get tickets, then yeah, maybe you do that. Maybe you negotiate with the Dolphins over there and Stephen Ross, who Stephen Ross has been a little bit, abrasive when it comes to MLS, because he's got his own company, Relevant Sports, that likes to bring in top-notch competitions like the ICC, International Champions Cup. So the International Champions Cup plays games in Hard Rock, and so I don't know. I'm not sure if they would play in Hard Rock, but it could make sense if you have the opportunity to get a kind of crowd that Seattle did. I would think you'd have to at least enter a conversation with Stephen Ross about hosting the game there. Some more questions here. Fox and Hound's great place. Yep. Fox and Hound's been around forever. And it's great is you've got these guys that are in Fox and Hounds because, they were there all day to watch the English Premier League. So Fox and Hounds opens up early in the morning so that, these expats can go and watch some EPL game in the morning. And here we come rolling in, and we just ruin their day probably because they don't necessarily want the drums that were brought in and the Latin beats that are happening and the Spanish songs. But we totally took over that place. It was a lot of fun. So Gabriel mentions, if Miami gets to the final next year, will we have the home field advantage? Would we get to play at Lockhart? It's Lockhart, but yeah, I'm not sure. I think, again, like I said, I think it really does depend on the demand. If there's a waiting list, you'd be foolish to put it in Lockhart. It'd be smart to move it to the larger stadium. No brainer. Sorry, Nicholas says, sorry for bringing this up, but there's issues with the current CBA expiring. There could be a possible work stoppage. Hope both sides resolve this before next season. Yeah, so if we start talking a little bit more about some Inter-Miami related topics, that has to come up. So there's the talk about the two Argentinian players that were being brought up about possibly Inter-Miami potentially being interested in. And I am going to look for that right now. But those two players, they're currently playing in Russia. And if there's any truth to the rumors about these two players, they're playing at Zenit currently in Russia. And the talk was that if we get these two players, they're going to cost somewhere in the neighborhood of 30 million pounds, I think it was, or euros. I'm not exactly sure what it was. I'm looking for the article right now. Here it is. And if those two Argentines come here, we're talking DP money. Some people have said it could be TAM or something like that. I'm not 100% sure, but it's Mateus Kranviter, I'm sure I'm saying it wrong, and Sebastian Driussi, both with a history at River Plate. And so that kind of, when you have that kind of conversation, when you start talking about those type of players, it makes me think about what you said, Nicholas, about the CBA. So if the team is talking to players like this, that would more than likely have to be DP related or high TAM. Do they know something that we don't? Do the owners of Inter Miami, do they know something? Because the CBA is currently being negotiated. There are conversations happening already. Do they know that there's a big possibility of the salary cap going up to a much larger extent, and also potentially another DP? Do they know things that we don't know? right? So are they looking at players that currently, when we look at them and say, they don't fit the current setup, but maybe they know something we don't. So I know the two things that the players are really pushing for in the CBA are obviously more money for those lower level players, the generation Adidas maybe, and just young players and mid-level players. There's such a big difference between the DPs and those players. The difference in how much they're making is gigantic. So I think they want to bring that gap a little bit closer together and raise up that the starting salary for MLS players. Makes sense. And then I know a big deal with the CBA will also be charter flights. You had people like Wayne Rooney complaining about the charter flights and it not, and having to flight, coach or whatever, or business class, and it being a challenge to go cross country, so all right. And it can definitely be, a challenge for those players. And it looks like we might have to welcome in Uncle Ed. Hey, Ed, can you hear us?
How's it going, guys? I'm here.
All right.
Just made it in.
Ed,
Sorry I missed some of it.
you missed a lot of it, Ed, but that's okay. You made it.
I'm here, man.
All right, so Ed, we kind of already talked about the finals, the MLS Cup final, and we had already kind of moved on to talking about the CBA. But let's go back up and just get your opinion. What were your thoughts on the final? I know you were busy drinking, maybe not paying all that much attention, but what are your thoughts on the final?
Oh yeah. Well, I paid a little bit of attention. I remember the little I do remember, between my drinking and stuff that I
Hey, look,
that
I
I
did too.
did see.
I can't blame you.
Well, the first half looked like I think Toronto dominated just a little bit more, in my opinion.
I agree.
Um, Second half, I missed the second goal, Peter. I think you saw when I walked away for a
And
second.
what were you doing, Ed?
I had, I've been drinking, therefore, you know,
Ed missed the goal because he was taking a piss.
yeah,
He took a
yeah, those things happen, people. So yeah, I missed the second goal. I never even saw the replay or anything. So I never saw the second goal. After we get off of this, I'm gonna finally check out the goal. But the third goal was awesome. I like that. And that one with Rui Diaz at the very end.
Yep.
That basically sealed the whole thing. So I think it was deserved. All those people in Seattle must be happy. There were some people at the watch party that we were at also that were like, there were a couple of Seattle people. They were ecstatic. They were going crazy. The only ones in there, and we were just like, all right, well, next year, it's us.
So Ed, were those people on vacation from Seattle, or are they just? Did you talk to them?
Yeah, yeah, they were in town just for a little bit. I thought they lived here, but no, they were
Okay.
in town, and they said they looked it up. They found the watch party. Well, that's the place we got to go to, and they were pretty happy, man. Except for a couple interruptions here and there that some Miami fans could be a little obnoxious with their what was it, salsa music or whatever that somebody put on as a joke.
I
Yeah,
don't know if
everybody's
that.
watching.
I don't know if that was a joke. It seemed like a mistake. I don't know. Was he? I don't know. That was pretty funny.
No, he did it on purpose. I know who did it. That
Yeah.
kid
Yeah.
Pinocho,
Yeah.
that guy. He put it in there just to throw people off, and
We.
and it did because even I went like, what?
Yeah. For those that obviously you guys weren't there, but we're watching the MLS Cup final. We've got the audio going through the entire bar, and out of nowhere in this English pub, salsa music starts playing in the middle of the game.
Yeah, and everybody's like,
What
what?
the heck?
And it kind of like everybody knew who the culprit was because everybody just looked over there and was like, Pinocho, which means Pinocchio in Spanish. I don't know why they call him that.
All right, whatever.
But yeah, he was the one that did. I just looked over and I knew it was him. He just had this big old smile on his face, like, I did something bad.
Yeah.
And then sure enough, but yeah, everybody noticed and they put the volume down on that after a little while. So it worked out.
Yeah. Yeah, as I was sitting there watching the game, and I was talking to these guys on the show before you jumped in, is as I'm watching this, I can't help but think, two things. especially during halftime, when at halftime it's tradition for Don Garber to get on and be interviewed. And I remember every year. Now this year we're not even paying attention. We don't care. But in years past, we're all glued to the halftime interview because we just want him to say Miami.
Yeah,
right?
Something about Miami. Anything about Miami.
We were so hopeful for our team to be announced, and every year we're just hopeful. Will they say Miami this year?
Peter, how many years did we live through this, man?
A lot of years.
It's incredible, and finally we could say, okay, this is the last final where we're not going to participate in.
Right.
You know, it's like, yeah, dude, I'm telling you, it must have been 10 years of us just sitting around, like, you know, waiting for him to say it's going to happen.
I don't even think we had the audio up during the halftime, and I think people are now telling us that he was talking about Charlotte as an expansion team for the 30th team. So it's always at halftime. That's always the number one topic is expansion, and like I said, we're always on pins and needles to listen. This year, turn the volume off. We don't care. We're already in.
We didn't care. We were just singing the whole time. Yeah. That's the thing. This time it was different. We didn't even care about halftime.
Didn't care.
Well, nobody cared.
But as I'm watching the game, I can't help but just dream and think, is it possible for Inter Miami to be there next year? Here's a question for you, Ed, that I want to somebody in our chat, I don't remember who it was, if we go back, Gabriel had mentioned that I want to get your opinion on his question. Gabriel had asked basically if Inter Miami, while they're playing at Lockhart, if Inter Miami makes it to the MLS Cup Final, would they play at Lockhart or would they play at Hard Rock? Would they have to go for the bigger stadium?
I think they'll go for the bigger stadium. I think they could fill it. You know, right now, from what little I've heard about the ticket sales, they're doing pretty well. So I don't think it's going to be a problem. Dude, I don't think they're going to have a problem filling up that stadium. I really don't. I think it's going to be too small.
It's possible.
At least the first year. And so far, I'm pleased with the players that they have. I'd love to be pleased with the coach that they have, but they haven't announced it yet.
What coach?
Yeah. Well, the one that we think they're going to get. I hope it's that guy. But
look,
is it possible the first year to get there? Let's see what other players they get, man.
Yeah.
We're going to find out in the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, I mean, another comment in here was also, and it's something that goes back to, I know Michelle Kaufman was talking about recently that we potentially could sign up to 5 players by Tuesday. So this is not the expansion draft. This is just some players that they may be able to announce as of Tuesday. So one of those players being that guy from Cincinnati, Ulloa, that we all know he's coming, but it just hasn't been announced. So he'd be one of them.
Right.
An additional 4 was the rumor. So we'll see. When we do our news video on Wednesday, we might have something new to actually talk about. We might have some players.
That might happen too. I mean, I know the only one that was really disappointed not winning that championship is probably Bradley, who I don't know if you saw on the news. People were saying that he had a huge bonus coming if he won the championship. I also heard that that a lot depended on him winning that championship to get a nice juicy contract as well.
That's what I was hearing.
Could have been tied together.
Yeah.
Could have been tied together, or it could be separate than, from his first contract that he would have gotten a bonus if they would have won that championship. But after that first goal, he was complaining, man. I think I even went up to you. I was like, dude, did you see that? That was him crying because he wasn't going to get his bonus.
He's just looking at the dollars, right?
Yeah, it was all like, my money, it's going to be all gone. No.
Yeah, I would hope that's not. I would hope that's not the case, but So, anyways, but some people, so a lot of people in the chat are just ready for more players. Then.
Oh.
Let's see here. Nicholas is also talking about. He thinks 30 teams is enough. It's not. They're going to go more. I think.
Yeah, at least 32.
I think they're going. Look. Garber is an NFL guy. For whatever reason, I think they'll go at least 32. NFL has 32. They're going to go 32. And you never know. They could go beyond that if if there's interest out there. If people are willing to spend $300 million to get a new team, are they going to say no?
I think they should wait, Peter. I think they're growing too fast. Also, if you think about it, there's a lot of money coming in, and they need to start, slowing down, because once they get to 32, they're not going to have those big fees coming in anymore, and they need to grow. They need to keep growing, and slow down on the expansion, I think.
No, I would hope for the same, but. And that's one thing Nicholas was mentioning in the chat, and it goes back to what everybody wants is promotion relegation. But I don't know if we ever see that, because tell an owner that spent $200-300 million to get into the league that you're now going to be relegated playing against teams that spent $5, maybe $10 million to get their team up and running. Yeah. I just don't see it happening.
Yeah, it's not going to happen for a while.
The only way I see it happening is if it's a league that's kind of, if MLS is split, like let's say they get to 36 teams, something crazy like that, right? And they split it 18 and 18, and the bottom 18 teams go into the second division, but it's still that same one ownership umbrella. That's still all MLS, right? Because it's a single entity organization. So I think that's the only way it happens, is because these owners still own a piece of the big pie. So even if you're an owner and your team is in the second division, you still own a piece of that big pie because you're still an owner of MLS. So if MLS was to splinter off and create two divisions out of itself, I think is the only way it happens.
I like that idea. It's possible, but who's going to want to go down is the problem. What teams?
Nobody ever wants to go down. They just don't get a choice. But look, right. if you were to say, okay, as of 2026, we've now got 36 teams, 2030, whatever the year is, and I'm an old man at that time. Don't agree with that, Ed.
All right. You're kind of old, man.
Yeah, but I'm not all. I'm okay. I'm not.
At least you got hair.
Hair, yeah, and it's not all gray. It's just partially gray.
Hey. Yeah.
But anyways, it's gonna be. If you took it some year in the future and just said everybody in the second half of the table gets dropped, But again, if you're still owning the big piece of the pie, you're part of the single entity structure. I could see it maybe happening. Nobody's going to want to go. But.
Nobody's going to want to go. Or they could maybe create a second division where they're going to pay maybe not as much. I'm thinking, right. Start creating something from now. They pay a big fee when they get in, not as big as it is right now. But maybe if they get promoted, they somehow pay a penalty. I don't know. Just throwing out an idea. They win the second division, they go up. They would have to pay a certain fee. I don't know. They have to work out something where the owners of the original teams are going to feel that it's fair and that they're going to get a cut of something because they did invest a lot of money. That's the thing.
Yeah, something you said about original teams, and maybe go off on a tangent. When you looked at that crowd today at Seattle, it's amazing. You see that same kind of crowd in Atlanta. Yeah. Where the areas that you don't see those kind of crowds are the legacy teams. Right. Maybe LA Galaxy being the lone team that still draws really well, but Dallas, Colorado, New York Red Bulls. I mean, none of these teams are drawing really, really well. DC, I don't know. I mean, I think they've gotten a bit of a jump since they've been in their own stadium, and they had Wayne Rooney.
That was kind of like a reboot.
Yeah, but
I see what you're saying. All these original teams, they've been down on Kansas City, one of them. They kind of had a resurgence for a little bit with their new stadium.
They totally got new ownership and rebooted. And so what if, instead of expanding to new cities after, say, 30 or 32, what if they you want to get in the league, you got to buy an existing team. You've got to buy an FC Dallas and do kind of what happened to Kansas City. It doesn't need to be a rebrand, but reboot. Yeah. Maybe it means a new stadium and a better location, but new ownership with new ideas and things like that. Because these legacy teams are struggling especially when you compare to the teams in the Northwest or your teams in Atlanta and I mean, look at what Sacramento may do. I mean, they've got an impressive following in the USL. And I'm hopeful with what we'll do here. But
they're talking about Charlotte is probably the other team that might come in. Who else? Vegas, I think they talked about. There's a lot of interest, but I think you have a point. From once they get to those 32, I don't think they have any space to grow. They might have to talk about the second division, or like you're saying, they're going to have to, whatever team's really low, or do a reboot, or find another city to move to.
Yeah,
they almost did that with. They did that with who was it? With Columbus almost. It almost happened with.
Right? Yeah, with Columbus, it still could happen. I mean, they have new ownership. They're building a new stadium, so they could still get that rebirth. They haven't gotten there yet. I think a lot of it has to do with their stadium, but they got Precourt out of there. So Anthony Precourt, the owner of Columbus Crew, is now going to be the owner of Austin. So, but he was not popular in Columbus. He was wanting to close down the team. So so they got rid of him. They've got some new ownership there, some local ownership, and they want to build a new stadium. They've got the renderings look cool. I'm all about the renderings. Renderings look really cool.
Yeah. Well, one of the guys is asking right now, why not Louisville? What do you think about Louisville as one of the expansion teams? Think it's too small of a market?
I think so. I think Louisville, they're a successful USL team, and you should be proud of that. And stay in with your USL and be proud that you're in USL. Be the king of USL. I don't know if Louisville is a big enough. And granted, I've never been there, but I just can't imagine it being big enough for MLS. What do you think?
Yeah. Well, that's why I asked you for also, because I think it's, Louisville. I mean, until he wrote it down, I never even thought about Louisville.
I mean, they do well. So. They do well in USL Louisville City. I think they may have won a championship or two. I know they draw well. I've watched a few of their games on ESPN Plus. I do enjoy watching the USL. So even though we want MLS, I've watched so many years of the lower division that I can't get away from it. I enjoy watching it.
One that I think should be in is Detroit, possibly.
Yeah, I mean they've got a good not so much USL. I think they're an NPSL club, but they draw huge numbers. They've got a lot of fan base, but I don't know if they have an owner that's deep enough pockets. When you're talking to MLS,
that's their problem.
When you're talking to MLS, it's those 3 or 4 things that they're really looking for: the local ownership with deep pockets and a stadium plan, the 2 biggest parts. And I don't know if they have either.
Right. But that's a market that I would think of. It's a big city. There's a couple big cities still out there that would sound more than Louisville. I'm afraid to say.
Yeah.
Sacramento wasn't even on the picture until they had the stadium deal going, and I guess the city's grown quite a bit.
Well,
I remember driving by there once. My brother lived up there in Northern California. I drove by once, and I was just like, I never even thought about Sacramento. I only knew that it was the capital of California. That was it. And then I drove by and I was like, this town ain't that small. And I was like, wow, But now it's a whole different thing, man. That city's grown quite a bit, and it's got a lot of soccer fans.
So what do you think? Ernie Fernandez in the chat is talking about Tampa. Now, we know we don't like Tampa.
No, we definitely want them to lose, but for them to have a team, I think it would be great. But then the rivalry right there is going to be with Orlando. They're so close to each other too, man. It's like saying going to Fort Lauderdale, isn't it?
It's well, a little bit further away, but not much. Yeah, it's an hour drive from Orlando to Tampa. I think that's too close.
Right.
Imagine
it's almost the same market.
Because also when you talk about these MLS teams, they talk about the area that they can control for talent, and it's X amount of miles or X amount of in radius, and that would really cut off Orlando and Tampa's radius. I mean, currently I'm guessing. I don't remember off the top of my head what the numbers are, but I would think that
I think they said 75 miles.
Yeah, so that would put Orlando's area in Tampa.
Right.
So that would have to get cut, right? They would have to say split that down the middle, and so they're
let's split it down the middle there. Yeah, but I know people that actually were Tampa fans or are Tampa fans, but they also go to Orlando City games. For certain games, so it's close enough. So
I don't think Tampa's. I don't think there should be another team in Florida.
I think that's
MLS. I think there is some truth to Florida not being the best sports town. I think there is some truth to that. Just Florida in general. People have said it about Miami. People have said it about Orlando. If you look at Orlando Magic games, they're empty. Tampa has struggled at times to get people in the crowd. So I just don't know if you get another if you get another MLS team in Florida. Now, Tampa's ownership was Bill Edwards. He sold it to the Tampa Bay Rays. So they got deep pockets. They own a baseball team. So there is possibility. I know Bill Edwards was doing a big push for a little while of Tampa to MLS, and obviously it didn't happen. But so there's.
But the Rays are not interested.
I don't know. I honestly, I think once they bought the team, there wasn't as much talk about them going to MLS.
And Bill Edwards, by the way, he's the guy that owns the Strikers name too, isn't he?
Correct. And actually, in today's conversation with some of the other soccer fans, that was brought up. Was the Fort Lauderdale Strikers branding part of the Rays' purchase of the Rowdies? So the person I was talking to thought it was. My thought is that maybe it's not, because the Rowdies don't own the Strikers branding. Bill Edwards does. Are they separate? Yeah. Or did he do it together? Did he lend money to the Fort Lauderdale Strikers and never get paid back under Bill Edwards, or did he do it under the Tampa Bay Rowdies?
Right. That's good question. One of you guys that's good at Google, look it up for us. If we're still on, maybe we'll talk about it a little bit more. But that's a good subject to bring up.
He and I were debating this during the MLS Cup Final. And again, I was leaning, and it's total guesswork, but I was leaning towards Bill Edwards himself may own that, because he probably lent out the money on his own and he wants to get paid back, and so he owns the branding of the Fort Lauderdale Strikers, which was odd because we were borrowing. Fort Lauderdale Strikers were borrowing money from their rivals in the season they were playing against each other. It was weird.
But hey, it worked out. Otherwise, I think they wouldn't have been able to finish the season until.
I don't know.
They're not around
those
anymore.
Brazilian owners said they had the money, but I don't know. But Ernie thinks that Tampa can do well in MLS.
Maybe they could. I'm not sure, man. They're attracting decent crowds for the Tampa Bay for the Rowdies, so that's something to look into. But I don't think like you're saying, unless they come up with some plan on an expansion to Tampa, we haven't heard anything about it. It's not even mentioned by MLS, so I think it's totally off the radar at this point.
Yeah, and Mr. XO Warrior, who watches all of our stuff, and so thank you so much, and thanks for joining. He says that Detroit has 3 billionaires. So so
wow.
They might have the money, they might have the backing. So
then why haven't they tried to do it? I mean, they're dragging tons of people to that stadium for an NPSL team. Wow.
Yeah, they do well for an NPSL team. So imagine what they would do for an MLS team. Look, that city doesn't have a lot to cheer for right now. So
right, it's true.
So I mean, I don't hear much about their football team or their baseball team, and we know the city itself has been decimated just through economics. So they need something to cheer for, something that's maybe a little more affordable. MLS games are not the cheapest thing in town, but they're a lot cheaper than NFL games.
They might find also something close to the urban center there because there's a lot of empty buildings around. I've heard they're trying to build it up kind of like here in Miami with Brickell, the Brickell area. There's tons of buildings going up. I don't think that's ever going to stop at this point. And it's all these young people that are moving over there because everything's closed and they can take the train and all that. Something that could happen in Detroit as well. And maybe it's an up and coming city in the near future.
Yeah, we'll see. But who knew, Ed? When we talked about doing the show tonight, our only agenda really was to talk about the MLS Cup Final. Who knew we would get on this long tangent about expansion? But it's a fun conversation. Right. So thanks so much for you guys in the chat for directing us there. It's a fun kind of conversation. Yeah. But they're talking also about Charlotte coming in, right?
Right.
What do you think about Charlotte as a MLS city? I don't know much about them other than what they have. NBA team.
I was going to tell you the same thing. Yeah, I don't know very much about them. They have the NBA team. What else do they have? Is there any other sport that they have? I'm not even sure. I don't
know. There's an NFL team in Carolinas. Do they play in Charlotte? I don't
know. We're more of a soccer guys, so we apologize, guys. Sorry, we're not too much into American football and other sports.
Not this summer, but last summer I did go to North Carolina, but I went to a small little coastal city up near the Outer Banks where my brother lives. So I didn't even sniff Charlotte. I didn't come close. But
where'd you land though?
Where did I end up?
Yeah, where did you land? I mean, what airport did you go to?
Oh, I didn't land. I drove.
Oh, okay. Oh, you drove.
I drove there.
Yeah. That's cool.
And it's funny is I can never remember the name of the city where my brother lives. I cannot for the life of me ever remember. It's a cute little beach town. I cannot remember the name of the city. I don't know.
That's how forgettable it is. The Carolinas.
All I know is, hey, it was beautiful, but I don't want to live there. It wasn't enough there. I don't want to live there. That's all. And I was like, you live there, not me. So it's okay.
Right. You like your big city.
I don't need a big city, but I need it bigger than that little coastal town in North Carolina.
Whatever its name is.
Yeah. I know.
Close to Charlotte.
Here's the thing. I can't remember the town that I actually went to, but the town next to it I can remember. Because
what's the name?
Beaufort.
What's the name? Whoa.
And I only remember because it looks like it's spelled Beaufort. And I kept saying Beaufort, and they're like, no, it's Beaufort. I'm like, it's spelled Beaufort. They're telling me, no, it's Beaufort. Like, but it's spelled Beaufort.
Bueller, yeah. Wow.
That's the only reason why I remember that name, but I don't know. But Charlotte sounds like they could. There it is. Yeah, they have it is the NFL team. It does play there, and he's a rich NFL owner.
Wow.
But I think, if I'm not wrong, that's the same owner that invested in the Alliance of American Football, which was a upstart. And Ed, you may not have known this about me. I enjoy learning about these upstart leagues. And so there was a league that played almost a full season, and not in competition with the NFL, but they were trying to be like the minor leagues of the NFL, and they looked like a real pro thing, but they did not have enough funding. And I believe it was the Charlotte owner that decided he was going to put in like $175 million, something to that effect, and then at the end of the day decided, once he got control of the league, to shut it down. Don't know why, but I think that might be the same owner.
Well, didn't they have a couple years ago, and I think they're starting a new one now. I think the WWE had a league, I don't know, like 10 years ago or something, and now they're starting to try. They have a new one or something like that.
What were we saying? The XFL? Sure.
There you go.
Yeah. The WWE XFL is doing it. Yeah. Who knows? They may have the same same problem. With this one though, you've got the owner of the WWE putting all his own personal money into it, and who knows if that'll do well, because these upstart leagues, no matter what sport you're in, it's hard, and especially when you're going up against NFL.
Yeah, I think it's hard to compete, even if you call it a second division or whatever they want to
All right,
call it.
so
To compete is
I
tough.
was right that the guy that shut down the alliance was from Carolina, but he was the hockey owner. I'm getting corrected in the chat. So he
Oh,
was from the Carolina Hurricanes. I knew he came from the Carolinas. I just couldn't remember which other sport he owned. But
right.
all right, so we might need to wrap this up soon, Ed. We've gone on for quite a while, but we are getting Mr. Exo Warrior is asking. So Gallardo, yes or no?
I think yes. I think yes. Because why are they waiting for so long? Even Michelle Kaufman talked about it the last time she was with the Big O. Why would they wait? There's a whole bunch of these candidates that are open to go, unless it's some other coach that's working right now and his contract isn't over to the end of the year. I don't see which other one it could
That
be.
has to be the reason. It has to be the fact that they're waiting
Mm.
for someone to finish their season, because otherwise, I'm frustrated as it shouldn't take that long. But I'm hoping it is Gallardo. It like what everything you said, Ed, makes sense. They're waiting for him to what he's in
Right.
the Copa Libertadores, so they're
Yeah, in the
waiting
final.
for that to finish, and then he'll come over. When is that final, Ed?
I'm not sure. I think it's the end of the
I thought
month.
so too. I thought it was the end of November.
Yeah.
So he would then miss the expansion draft. But in all reality, Paul McDonough is probably going to pull the strings on that. Even if
Or maybe they're talking to him already, and he's saying, "Okay, this is what I want." I don't know.
it's
It's tough to
but
say. But like I said, Paul McDonough, he knows what he's
he
doing.
does.
He's got a lot of experience, so he's probably getting he. Why don't they make him a coach?
Well, just because you're good at hiring and firing players, he does have a coaching experience as a college coach, but that doesn't mean he's the right for X's
Well,
and
next we
O's.
got to get him on the show. We got to get him on the show and start. And I'm going to ask him then. How come you don't coach, man? What's the
Yeah,
deal?
yeah.
Come on.
All right, well,
Yeah.
let's wrap this up with that, Ed. It's been a
Okay.
47-minute show at this point. Let's wrap it up with in the near future. We are going to be kind of going back to what Ed and I used to do, and that's bringing in somebody to talk to, right? So we'll start bringing in some guests in the very near future. I think maybe potentially next week. It's possible. There's a possibility of having guests. We just wanted to kind of wait because if you guys are watching these videos, we've had some problems. I've had some jagged videos, and what's so frustrating is today I got it to work with the same tech, same everything, but it seems to be working okay. But we wanted to make sure,
Perfect.
we wanted to make sure we got the kinks out before we brought in a guest, and so we should be talking to somebody like Paul McDonough in the very near future. People like that.
Yeah, and right now, since you guys can leave something in the comments or right now the chat if you want, do it on the comments because then we'll check
Yeah.
that one for sure. Let us know what guests you guys would like us to talk to, and we're going to try to bring them in. We're good at that.
Realistic guess. I mean, it might be harder to get David Beckham, but
Yeah, no,
we could.
no Messi. Come on, guys, Messi's going to
Yeah,
be tough.
but
Beckham, I don't know, man. Maybe we can use our
yeah,
influences.
but people like Paul McDonough. That's probably a more doable request, and it'd be fun to talk to him. So look for some interesting guests in the near future, and some of our guests may literally just be fans from other cities that we want to get to know, and so that'll be fun too. So that should be happening in the very near future. Hopefully, we may have something next week. Not Paul McDonough, even though we're talking about him. It won't be him next week, but we could have somebody next
not
week.
yet.
So Gabriel says Ozzy Alonso would be a fun person to have on. George Acosta would be a fun person to have on. Maybe.
Maybe we can do.
Ozzy would be fun. Yeah, he's a Cuban guy. I know there was a question in there about could we get a Cuban player. Cubans aren't known for being great at soccer, but Ozzy is. But
Ozzy's a good one. There's another player also that's Cuban that's a good player. I forgot his name. So I think it starts with a C. Well, we'll talk about it on the next
And
show.
if you think about Ozzy also, he's older, so there's no possibility he's not protected when it comes to expansion draft because he's older. I don't know. I'm not sure. But
But he still plays pretty well, man. So I'd say we should get him. I think he's where's he at? Vancouver, I think now.
I think you might be right. Yeah. I mean, he was Seattle for so long, but I think he might be in Vancouver.
Right.
Anyways, thanks so much everybody for watching. Make sure to watch our construction video that will go up tomorrow morning, and then make sure on Wednesday we will put up a news video of some sort. If you missed any of our previous videos, there was a cool interview we did with the Miami FC head coach, Paul Dalglish, so you can go check that out. But more stuff coming up this week, and then also look for some cool guests in the near future. So thanks so much for everybody for jumping into the chat and having this conversation with us. And thanks for everybody that's watching it at a later date. And like, subscribe, and share, and we will talk to you all next week.